gonna move to the Q&A. We got several in. I think we have 15 minutes here. We probably can hit, I don't call it three or four. First one, we sort of already hit this, but let's just would love to concisely hit it one more time since it's coming up in almost every single conversation. Dan, what are the current AI models like Copilot falling down? Where are those areas?
Yeah. Um, so I can best answer this with an actual customer story. So we work with a large financial institution who deployed Copilot. They actually purchased an enterprise license at some point last year. And the use case was primarily to put it in the hands of their traders, so commodities options traders, to help them make better decisions as they're transacting, as they're making trades. So think of an example of maybe they would ask Copilot, like, "What's going on with coffee today? Should I buy, sell? What do the docs say?" And so they deployed Copilot, and out of the gate, it was pretty healthy adoption. It was about 60% adoption, so not bad.
Mhm.
After about 3 months, adoption just went drastically down. They were at about 6%. And so we were engaged by them at that point, and we helped do a little bit of a post mortem. And what it really came down to was um, options traders couldn't trust the output of Copilot. More specifically, they spent more time validating the output of Copilot than they would have spent if they had just picked up the phone and called their coworker who knows a lot about coffee, right? And so it sort of does go back to the point I made earlier about never trusting the output of a single model. Instead of identifying specific discrete tasks that LLMs are good for, Copilot takes the approach of being one thing to everyone, right? And attempting to be the sort of magical chatbot full of answers. And so we've seen that fall down again and again, and that just keeps reinforcing our focus on specific business problems with those workhorses of AI.
All right, next one, Todd. I want you to handle this one. I think this is right down your alley. What suggestions would you have on best practices as this relates to ethical concerns and data readiness for organizations who want to ensure that improper biases are not applied to Gen AI results?
It's critical, right? And it's another flavor of a challenge, I guess, with the answers that can result from using Gen AI. The same things we use to prevent inappropriate use, to measure toxicity, that symphony of machine learning models approach we leverage with Pienzo, can very easily be used to identify and prevent things, whether it be in prompting or in the answer itself, that reflect bias. I think we've seen examples historically where AI has become incredibly biased after being trained on the internet or being trained on things in a way where biased perspectives are something that is inherent in the training model. Machine learning models being able to identify that, filter that, to us are a critical part of governance. I think, though, it's equally important to be able to do that at the prompt level. And I think that's the way we sandwich it, for lack of a better term, where, being able to apply that filtering and screening to both prompting and answer is critical to success and reliability of any deployment.
Perfect. So the next one, so you hit on the use case in detail, but wanted to hear a little bit more about the actual ROI results of the use cases. Todd, you talked about a use case. Dan, you mentioned a few. Could you talk about some high value ROI metrics and what those results looked like?
Yeah, yeah. I'll offer one or two here. So circling back to the customer that I mentioned at the outset of the call, that telecom customer who is using Pienso within their contact center environment, I mentioned sort of the top line savings that they realized, and what that really came down to was the fact that for every call, they would spend about 20 seconds designating what happened on the call, right? Essentially choosing from a drop down menu what the customer called about, what problems they presented, that sort of thing. They replaced that with a topic classification model, or I should say a slew of topic classification models from Pienso. And so when you look at the scale of their organization, 20 seconds per call, 500,000 calls a week, 52 weeks a year, that ended up saving them £7 million a year. They happen to be a UK-based company. And so that was just pure top line savings in terms of efficiency. They were able to do more with the agents that they have. Interestingly, that wasn't the primary motivating factor for implementing Pienso. They're a very customer-centric organization who care about that customer experience, and they purely wanted insights into how can we serve our customers better? Where are they running into friction? What can we remove from their plate? But once we realize that sort of top-line operational benefit, everything else becomes gravy. And then the other use case that I'll mention actually comes from the government side of our business, where their use case is focused on monitoring foreign sources of media for things like misinformation, disinformation, threats, that sort of thing. I won't go into the details of the solution that we put together for them, but suffice it to say that there's a slew of models doing the things that they care about, classifying articles and publications so that they can be further processed, and then generating things like summaries and extracting the narrative. What is the article actually talking about? That process used to be facilitated via a team spending 9 hours per day, manually doing the analysis and entering it into various databases and spreadsheets. We've replaced that process, and now they spend about an hour a day just ingesting the results of that slew of machine learning models. We're doing a lot of that manual heavy lifting on their behalf.
That's great. I love how you hit on the government. So I was actually at lunch yesterday with a friend, works at one of the largest payers in the world. They're obviously trying to solve for AI as well, and PHI is a very big concern for them. So the way I discussed with him was just that I was like, well, if the government's using Pienso, they've looked at this every single way you possibly can to just get comfortability around the data. So hopefully that helps some of you folks out on the call as you're trying to go through your governance and security questions. Todd, do you want to hit on any AI use cases that had really strong ROI metrics attached to them?
Yeah, there's a few. I think what's kind of universal around them is that there aren't just cost savings or cost avoidance components, but there are customer or employee experience benefits. And most commonly, because we're focused on the things that are going to provide the biggest ROI, they're related to revenue acceleration and revenue generation. I'm thinking of an example right now where a particular client, again in the insurance industry, was able to not only be more efficient in terms of their operations and how they were handling underwriting, but also to be able to do it with lower risk, fewer errors, and the ability, I think, most importantly, to capture more business, to materially impact their bottom line, because they were able to lessen the attrition, I guess is the way to say it, or things related to quoting that just took longer before they applied Gen AI, that resulted in greater drop off and less business. By changing that time period through what they did, they were able to capture more of that business, to change that number, and they saw a much higher success rate and much greater revenue.